On orders from King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, the Bahrain Independent Commission of Inquiry was established on 29th of June 2011 to assess the incidents that occurred during that period and to report on their consequences. According to the report by this officially appointed commission, the report that was released on November 23rd, the Bahraini government had inflicted torture and had subjected detainees to other forms of physical and psychological abuse. Recently moved to New York City from the West Coast. She is one of the founding members of Witness Bahrain, a group of international observers monitoring and reporting on human rights abuses, collective punishment, and suppression of Arab Spring democracy activists in the Kingdom of Bahrain. Radhika was in Bahrain as part of an international solidarity effort aimed at providing an international civilian presence to report and monitor the situation on the ground when she was deported. Witness Bahrain was founded in February of 2012 on the eve of the first anniversary of Bahrain's ongoing movement. Their team members include attorneys, writers, humanitarian workers, and community organizers. Previously, Radhika has supported human rights and democracy movements in Mexico, Pakistan, Palestine, and the Philippines. Please join me in welcoming our speaker this evening.
Well, thank you for that very kind introduction, and thank you all for coming out today. Ruled by the Khalifa family since 1783. The current king, King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, has ruled Bahrain since 1999. It's a small island. It's about, it's next to Qatar, and there's a little star that says Manama. So as you can see, it's a small island. About 1.2 million people reside in Bahrain. A little less, put the estimates between 60 and 70% Shia. Bahrain's also home to the US Navy's 5th Fleet, and US arms sales to Bahrain have been between $5 to $18 million a year between 2006 and 2011. And at the end of the talk, we'll get into a little bit about why this is important. This is a very smart move because the king actually implemented this National Action Charter, which put an end to Bahrain's 1990s uprising. And so it was a smart move on behalf of the protesters because the king actually supported the National Action Charter. In response to this calling for really, you know, people know it's because he wanted to sort of suppress this uprising before it started. So starting in February, the youths of February 14th, this group that wasn't based in any political parties or religions or any affiliated groups, established a Facebook page calling for change and radical reforms. And some of these reforms included a new constitution, a call for executive authority to be exercised by an elected prime minister, release of human rights activists. The protests on February 14, 2011, what might come to a lot of surprise to people was they weren't that big. Only about 6,000 people came out, and they varied in size from 50 to 1,000 people. Nonetheless, protesters were attacked with tear gas, birdshot, rubber bullets, and next day, thousands of people gathered at Pearl Roundabout and setting up tents and camping. And actually, you know, people describe the move as festive. You know, despite the repression and the torture and the fear and all of that, Bahrainis really know how to throw a good protest, I have to say. So I ate very well at those protests. So they took over Pearl Monument. I'll show you a picture later for those of you who haven't seen. It's sort of, you know, people call it Bahrain's Tahrir. It's from close range. No warnings were given. 4 people were killed. Medical personnel were beaten. You know, they clearly identified themselves. It was very repressive. So here's just a few pictures from that period. So that's the Pearl Roundabout, for those who haven't seen it. Protesters also carried flowers during this period to show that they were nonviolent. People running from tear gas. For those of you who don't want to know, who haven't seen what King Hamad looks like, well, there's his face on a tank. Protesters lighting a candle in a spot where someone was killed. So February 22nd, you have 200,000 people coming out, joining what they call a Martyrs' March to honor the people who were killed. And then a few days later, you start to see the demands change from that original Facebook page that I talked about. People are now starting to chant, the people demand they're dismissed 150 from their jobs. This medical complex was completely under lockdown and still is in many ways. When I was there in February, we wanted to visit, but we could not get in because there were checkpoints outside. And you know, the police have actually, during this period, were stationed inside the hospital. It's Bahrain's, you know, the public hospital of Bahrain. Keep in mind, it's a small country. And so what police would actually be watching to see who looked like they had protest-related injuries and segregate them to the 6th floor. And people would be beaten on that floor. Patients would scream, "Don't take me there." One doctor was actually arrested while operating on a protest victim who later died, and then the doctor was charged with I think something along the lines of murder or letting this guy die. So it was pretty outrageous to these two doctors, one of whom was a neurosurgeon. He asked that his name not be used, and another was a female doctor, and we were chatting for a little bit, and then they both, you know, mentioned that they had been arrested and tortured. This one neurosurgeon was one of 3 in the country. 2 of the 3 had been fired, and the 3rd was actually an Indian citizen. So it's you know, completely appalling that, you know, the treatment of anyone affiliated with protests or thought to be protesting, but also the attacks on the medical community are pretty. Well, I ended up going there with Witness Bahrain. So basically, what people don't know so much is that after March, the protest continued. I think sometimes people think, oh, tear gas, like, that's not as bad as being shot at, or like, it's just gas. It's really overwhelming. I mean, it's a massive amount of tear gas. And I've lived in the West Bank for a year and a half during the Second Intifada, so I'm used to tear gas. But these levels are just, you know, kind of insane, and you know, you have, like, you can't escape it. An email, and like I could smell it come in to the room that I was in because the window was open. And it pervades every corner of a village. And you know, you have stories of, like, you know, people putting their babies to bed in the bathroom, in the bathtub, because it's the best room in the house, you know, to not get tear gassed. It's really overwhelming. Oh yeah, and they don't just shoot tear gas out and about. They also shoot it at your head, which is pretty frightening. And there's been a number of deaths because of tear gas fired directly at people. And when I was there, I had the experience of tear gas being shot close to me as well, and it's really pretty frightening.